Okay, I want to talk about the sheep brain dissection. So, the first one I want to talk about on the list would be the dura mater. It's white connective tissue right here. Very tough, dura mater. Now, right here we have the cerebrum, and right here we have the cerebellum. So cerebrum, and then your cerebellum right there. And then you have your frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, temporal lobe right here. Frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital, and temporal lobe. Frontal, parietal, occipital, temporal. Now, we have longitudinal fissure right here, which separates your hemispheres. Longitudinal fissure is going to separate your hemispheres. Your left hemisphere from your right hemisphere. Transverse fissure is going to separate your cerebrum from your cerebellum. Right here, we can see that you have the brainstem area right through here. So here's your frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, and temporal lobe. Now, we have the pons, medulla oblongata, and this would be the spinal cord. Now, we have the cranial nerves. This right here is the olfactory nerve, here and here. Olfactory, right here and right here. This right here is the optic nerve, right here and right here. This structure right here is called the optic chiasm. Optic nerve here, optic nerve here. Optic chiasm, where they sort of crisscross. There's going to be some fibers going to this hemisphere, some fibers going to crisscross and go to the contralateral hemisphere. So some of the fibers go to this hemisphere, some of the fibers go to this opposite hemisphere, or the contralateral hemisphere, with the optic nerve. Comes from the eye. All right. The next cranial nerve I want to show you would be the trigeminal nerve, here and here. So, trigeminal nerve would be here and here. So, olfactory nerve, optic nerve, trigeminal nerve. This right here would be your pituitary gland. Pituitary gland here. This would be the pons here, medulla oblongata. Okay, I want to next talk about, let me show you this on another brain. So, here we have the olfactory nerve here. This is the optic nerve. This would be the trigeminal nerve. This right here would be the pituitary gland. This is the pons, medulla oblongata. Okay? So, I want to next talk about the sheep brain, or the hemisphere here. Again, right here, you can see the longitudinal fissure right here, which I've cut. I've removed the dura mater right here. So here's the dura mater, it's been removed. Here's the longitudinal fissure. And here is the transverse fissure right here. Longitudinal fissure, transverse fissure right here. Now, we have the frontal lobe. This right here is your olfactory nerve. This right here is your, olfactory nerve, frontal lobe, parietal lobe, temporal lobe, occipital lobe. Frontal lobe, parietal lobe, temporal lobe, occipital lobe. Transverse fissure here. Cerebellum. We have the first hump right here called the pons. Second hump is called the medulla oblongata. I think I said that wrong. Right here we have the pons and then medulla oblongata right here. The first hump would be the pons and then medulla oblongata. Okay, now if you look right here, again, your pons and the medulla oblongata. Okay, I want to show you the cerebral peduncle. Cerebral peduncle is going to connect the cerebrum to the brain stem, being the pons and medulla oblongata. So we have the cerebral peduncle right here. Here's your cerebral peduncle right here, which connects the cerebrum to the brain stem. So this is the pons, this is the medulla oblongata. So cerebral peduncle. Cerebellar peduncle now is going to connect the cerebellum to the brain stem. So cerebral peduncle connects the cerebrum to the brain stem, and then your cerebellar peduncle is going to connect the cerebellum to the brain stem here. Okay, we want to next talk about the gyrus and the sulcus. So if you look right here, you can see the gyrus right here. Gyrus is a ridge and the sulcus is a valley. So valley or sulcus right here, and then you have the ridge right here. Here's a ridge here. Here's a ridge here. And here's a sulcus here. Okay. I want to next talk about the cerebellum here. So we have the anterior lobe and the posterior lobe. Anterior lobe, posterior lobe. I want to show you these structures here associated with the posterior part of your cerebellum, of your cerebellum. So right here, if this brain will hold up, we have the vermis right here. Here's the vermis right here. And right here, we have the fovea on the sides. So here's the vermis, and here's the fovea. If you look right here, you can see it a little bit better on this hemisphere here. Looks pretty good on this one. So here's your vermis again, and fovea. Okay. I want to next talk about the arbor vitae. So if you look at these sheep brains, the mid-sagittal section, you will notice that you have right here associated with the cerebellum, the arbor vitae. So here's the arbor vitae right here. Looks like a tree. Same thing here. Looks like a tree. Arbor vitae of the cerebellum. This is your fourth ventricle here. This is your fourth ventricle. Okay? Let's talk about the corpus callosum. is right here. Here's your corpus callosum right here. Here's your septum pellucidum or clear septum. Clear septum is going to be a membrane that's going to separate your lateral ventricles. And fornix is right here. Corpus callosum, clear septum or septum pellucidum, and then your fornix right here. Let me show you on this hemisphere. Corpus callosum, clear septum or septum pellucidum, and fornix. Now, if you stick the probe in here, you can see that this is going to be the lateral ventricle. Lateral ventricle right in here. Lateral ventricle right in here. And let me show you this used sheep brain here. This one might be the right one to use. So if you look at the probe here, you can see this used sheep brain that's been here for a semester or so. We can see if it will hold up right. Or maybe I'll use this one. Okay, it's this one. If I can pry it open here. So, right here is your lateral ventricle. It just don't want to do right. So lateral ventricle is right there, where the probe is. Lateral ventricle. See that? Lateral ventricle. Okay. Now, so deep in here is the lateral ventricle. Lateral ventricle. There's two lateral ventricles. Now, this structure right here is called the foramen interverticillari. Foramen interverticillari. That's going to be what connects. It's going to be what connects a lateral ventricle to the third ventricle. So, right on top of the thalamus right here would be the foramen interverticillari. So this structure right here looks like a ball. Is called the foramen. Sorry, this structure underneath this foramen interverticillari is called the thalamus. This structure right here is the thalamus that the probe is circling. This is your thalamus. Foramen interverticillari right here. And then right in this area here, you would have your third ventricle. So lateral ventricle, third ventricle, and then you have your fourth ventricle right here. I'll just go through that again, just to make sure. Lateral ventricle, third ventricle, fourth ventricle. Now, there's a cerebral aqueduct, which is going to be conveying the cerebral spinal fluid. So right here, going down right through here. The central canal of the spinal cord. It's going to go down the spinal cord and lubricate the spinal cord. So cerebral spinal fluid is secreted by your ventricles. So here's your lateral ventricle, third ventricle in here, and fourth ventricle. And here is the cerebral aqueduct right through here. Okay, now we have the thalamus, hypothalamus, infundibulum, pituitary gland. Thalamus, hypothalamus, below the thalamus, infundibulum, pituitary gland. And here we have the pons, and here we have the medulla oblongata. Pons and the medulla oblongata. Okay, so let's see if there's anything else here. Let me show you that again on this brain, this hemisphere. Lateral ventricle, third ventricle deep within here, fourth ventricle right there, cerebral aqueduct, thalamus, hypothalamus, infundibulum, pituitary gland. There is a pineal body or pineal gland right here. Right there. And here it is more visible right here. Here's your pineal body or pineal gland right there. Now there's a structure called your corpora quadrigemina right here. Corpora quadrigemina right there. Right there. Fourth ventricle, cerebral aqueduct, pineal body, corpora quadrigemina. Now, I want to show you anterior commissure, middle commissure right in the middle of the thalamus, and posterior commissure very close to your pineal body. Anterior, middle, and posterior. Pineal body or pineal gland, and then your corpora quadrigemina. Let me show you the corpora quadrigemina right here on the undissected sheep brain here. So, I don't know if you can see it or not, but I'm digging around in the transverse fissure, and I don't know if it'll show up. Two people need to be here, and it don't want to show up. I wanted to show you the four bodies. I can get it to do right. So, right here, you can see the four bodies. There you go. That's a good picture. That's the corpora quadrigemina. The superior ones are called the superior colliculi. The inferior ones, if you ignore that piece of fat or whatever it is right there, that's the inferior colliculi. So superior colliculi and inferior colliculi. It's a good picture. Okay. And let's see, I think I've touched bases everything. Also remember that your diencephalon, that's just your thalamus and your hypothalamus. So thalamus, hypothalamus, infundibulum, pituitary gland. And this structure right here is the optic chiasm right here, the optic nerve. If you look right there, there's your optic nerve. And that right there is your olfactory nerve. So let me show you that again. Olfactory and optic nerve. And I don't know if I've showed you this already or not, but you find the right brain here. So we have the gyrus or the ridge, and the sulcus right here. So gyri, all these right here, the ridges, and the sulci would be right here, you know, the valleys. Also, there's going to be, you know, arachnoid mater and pia mater, you know, associated with the covering of the brain. So the dura mater has been removed. That's this stuff right here. And now you have your dura mater and pia, excuse me, you have the dura mater has been removed, and you have your arachnoid mater and pia mater that's visible here. And I had a brain that had it more visible. So yeah, right here, this sort of spider web stuff, that would be your arachnoid mater. And then the pia mater would be, you know, directly covering the brain. Okay, and I'm looking at my list, and I don't see anything that I haven't covered. I think we've covered everything. All right, we have time for the eye, the sheep eye. So let me show you some structures here. So remember that the eye is going to be innervated by your optic nerve, right? Cranial nerve number 2, this right here. And there's a lot of fat and extrinsic eye muscles, mostly extrinsic eye mostly fat, that's going to be intertwined, mixed in with the extrinsic eye muscles. So this is, a lot of fat that's going to protect the eye. So this is an optic nerve right here. And then here we have lots of fat. Here I have, this eyeball here that, has lots of fat around it, and you can see the tan looking stuff. That's extrinsic eye muscles. This right here is the cornea, a thin translucent structure. Cornea. This white structure here is the sclera. And we can see right here, I've removed the fat and fascia and all that, and here I've saved this one to show you, I saved this eye for demonstration to show you an extrinsic eye muscle here, an extrinsic eye muscle here. So I've removed the fat away. So extrinsic eye muscle here, here. Right here we see some extrinsic eye muscles as well. And then you can see the optic nerve right here. Okay. Now, here I've opened this up. I've cut through the sclera, and I'm going to show you some things here. So I'm just going to hope this stays put, which is not appearing to be going to stay put. So you see where the probe is at right there? That's the pupil. So the pupil is right here. Now this right here around the pupil, excuse me. So the pupil is right here, and this ring that's around the pupil is called the iris. Now, we have this stuff that's inside. This right here is called the lens. The lens is right here. This gelatin looking stuff is called the vitreous humor. This gelatin stuff is called the vitreous humor. And let's just dump this out here. Let me put the camera down, and I'm going to dump this stuff out in the tray. Okay, now got that taken care of, and now I'm going to show you the lens right here. Here's your vitreous humor right here, and here is the retina right here. Here's the retina here's the retina right here. And then the shiny stuff is the tapetum lucidum. And that's all of the sheep brain, as well as the sheep eye dissection.